Whereabouts are you? You in MIQ?
Yeah, I'm in Hamilton. So I flew in from LA maybe 10 days ago, and
Oh,
you land on the tarmac in Auckland, and they don't tell you where you're going until a like an army official comes on the plane, and he's like, right, you guys are jumping on a bus and you're going down to Hamilton. So that's when you find out where you're actually going. But I mean, it's all right here. Like I was pretty lucky to even get a spot, to
there's
be honest.
space. Yeah.
Because it was just, I mean, it was pure luck and sort of, you know, I've got really good managers who sort those things for me, and it was just hearing all those horror stories of like tens of thousands of people trying to queue up and come home for Christmas or see loved ones or sick ones or anyone like that. So
It's
um,
pretty tough, hey? It's only
yeah,
going to get worse, I think,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. It's not ideal. So I haven't interrupted you during your work day. What are you
No,
doing for work?
I'm with MB, interestingly enough. So I do a lot of work around the just transitions strategy. So that's as a result now of the anticipated closure of TY. So not really interrupting anything. It's pretty quiet at the moment. So a
So
couple of meetings here, a couple of meetings there.
what sort of transition are you managing? Like is it just forecasting that TY closure in a couple of years? And
Yeah, it's just looking at, I suppose it's looking at potential industries for the region, the community development that's going to um, prepared prior to the closure because of the ripple effect that that potential closure could have on our region. Education training, what else are we looking at? Clean energy, future foods, just how the region itself can transition into multiple industries, so not to rely on one like we have done for so long.
because
So it's
it's
pretty
not.
cool work.
That's awesome work. Like
Mm.
it's not only the closure of TY that it's going to affect, isn't it? Like there's a number of indirect industries and
Oh, huge.
like correlating businesses in Invercargill that and
Mm.
it indirectly employs like upwards of what 2,000 people, right?
Yeah, so we've got about 1,200 odd people there. And then you've got the indirect effect that it has on the smaller, SMEs around Invercargill, some of them whom have around about, 60% of their revenue is from the smelter. So you imagine that for a small engineering firm, it's going to be a huge shock.
Not only that, like it's going to have effect on, a potential effect on schools, on housing market.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
because you've got a sort of a boomer age or an older workforce at TY
Mm.
who have got families to support, um, with some of them probably with young families, thinking what are we going to do here? So it's
Yeah,
yeah,
we do. It's pretty, but it's been very interesting. So you've got your, the ones that are ready to retire and will take their retirement and they'll be very happy.
right.
And then you've got the young ones who have just started in at TY as a new career pathway. And then TY is doing really well at the moment. So who knows what the outcome will be? Then you've got all these other sectors around hydrogen and aquaculture that really do rely on what happens as a result of TY around the
Right.
power. So this will be a very interesting space over the next 4 to 5 years, I think, down here.
Yeah, it was being discussed when I was straight out of high school. I had a gap year and I spent a couple months at TY. This was sort of 2014, and I just went through enterprise recruitment there, and I was just
Oh yeah.
contracting, and it was being talked about then. So that's what, 7 years ago. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, all right. Let's crack into it. So
Yeah, cool.
I'm really glad to be here, joined today with Toni Biddle. She spent over 10 years working for the Ministry of Social Development, and during that time, she completed several developing leaders programs and gained qualifications in social service. Then Toni transitioned into the world of tourism. Toni was the team leader at Flight Centre for 4 years, or for over 4 years, and then went on to own and operate Biddle and Malcolm Travel for a couple of years. Uh, in 2016, Toni was elected to the Invercargill City Council and served just over 4 years, including the role of Deputy Mayor for over a year. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. How's things?
Kia ora, Sam. Yeah, really good, thank you. Back here in Murihiku, the rain is slowly falling in the background, which is quite nice to be working from home today.
Yeah,
But kia ora.
for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, is that where the majority of your work has been coming from? Have you been lucky enough to be working from home?
Lately, fortunately for me, I was in a previous role with MB, developing a regional skills leadership group, which has been stood up now, and they're well on their way to achieving great things for the region around work planning and future work planning in our area. And so I was started my new role within MB on the first day of lockdown.
Oh,
So I've
wow.
been here ever since, and I actually really enjoy working from home. So
Yeah.
for now, I'll be grateful that I have a job and I'm able to work from home, and then we'll see where that takes me once we're over all the lockdown phases throughout the country.
I'd like to take you back a little bit and just look at your work in social development. Uh, what initially inspired
Mhm.
you and motivated you to get into the world of social development?
Yeah, really good question. And I was reading through notes and thinking back myself as to how that really happened. I spent quite a few years with the Invercargill Licensing Trust, going through the process of hospitality and up to senior roles within the trust. And I was a single mum at that time on a domestic purposes benefit. And I remember having a conversation with one of my case managers, who said, what's your future? What kind of thing are you wanting to do to further your employment and career opportunities? And I said, well, I think I could do your job really well. And she sort of said, well, put your money where your mouth is. Here's an application. And so I applied. I was fortunate enough at that time that there were some openings in Rotorua. So I actually started working for Ministry of Social Development, or Work and Income, as we know it,
Yeah.
in Rotorua, which was very different dynamic than here in Invercargill. Got a lot of solid foundational training from that role. Very different, communities up there.
Mm.
So I was grateful for that opportunity to start there, and I was there for a couple of years before I transferred back home here to Invercargill,
What was the,
where
demo,
I've been ever since.
what was the demographic like in Rotorua compared to Invercargill?
I think predominantly more Maori Pacific in Aotearoa than there is obviously in Invercargill. But as I've learnt, the demographic really makes no difference. There's still that pocket of people that still need that help. And yeah, so I took a lot of good skill set from being able to deal with the demographic in Aotearoa, which there was just more of than there is here. So we're very fortunate here in Southland. Mm.
During your time in social development, like you experienced two central governments being in charge, Labor prior to 2008 and a national government from 2008 to 2011. I think you're still there. What were the differences, if any, in their approaches to that particular sector? And did you notice anything in your job significant
Oh,
differently?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was around when they brought the new job seekers agreements in, that National brought in. I was there when, our caseloads become more about front facing and whomever walked in the door rather than
Mm.
having your own caseload to get to know and understand. The introduction of drug testing was brought in when I was there. So that was a very different conversation to be having with clients.
Mm.
I think I noticed quite a huge difference, and I think that's what sparked my love for policy and politics. Was to see policy being rolled out and implemented. It was to understand the importance of good policy and what each policy was trying to achieve. So I think that activated my interest in not only social development but social policy and public policy and working in public sector in general. Yeah.
During your time as a case manager, were there any trends that you noticed with your clients? Was there anything that you believed to be broken in the system?
I'm not sure about broken. I think it's really important to understand that we were the last port of call for some of our clients. And, rapport was incredibly important to have with your caseload. And if you didn't have that rapport, then it was very hard to ascertain what the problems were, to be able to get the background services around particular clients to see them progress. So there was a very strong movement from Labour to National around that sort of change in how we connected and operated with clients at Work and Income. I don't think broken was ever a use I would describe the system. I think it's one that you really need to understand as a case manager to navigate. So if you've got the good, solid foundational training as a case manager, you can really build relationships and rapport with people and understand that half of them don't want to be there anyway. I know I didn't when I was a client. I never really wanted to be there, but it was a matter of having to at that point in time. So the training, I think, was always important and critical to me as a case manager, and learning to develop that skill set to be able to communicate better, understand where they were coming from. And I think always reminding yourself that it wasn't your money. It wasn't your money that you were spending. Giving full and correct entitlement, to me, was always my foundation, and then making sure we built from there. But I love my time there. I still see a lot of my clients that I had back then, especially the youth clients who are now in full-time employment. I still see people that I've placed into employment out and about in the community, still doing really well, and often stop and have a yarn about the good old days, they call them.
What's that like? That must be pretty special.
It's cool. It's very special. Absolutely. Especially the youth. I did a lot of work with youth when I first went there, and I became a work broker from a case manager, went to work broker, and I still have people say, oh, you got me that job at such and such, and it was really cool. It set off this career pathway for me, and I did this and I done that. And, do you remember me? I was the single mum with the 2 twins, and I was having problems, and it was really tough going. And, you were always there and supportive and helped me, navigate the world as we know it now. So that's really special. And to still have that so many years later, that's why we do what we do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That sounds really cool. Rewarding. I mean, I'm sure at times it must have been taxing as well.
Yes.
Because you're hearing, regardless of whether personal things are going well or not, you're hearing like countless stories about how things have gone wrong and how they want to change and improve their lives as well.
Yeah, and we always had, I had a philosophy around solution-based and not problem-based. So we tend to talk about the solution of the issue rather than the issue itself, because half of the time the issues are things that we can't help. They're out of our control, but what we can do is look at the solutions around the issue. And that's normally how I got most of the progress within my client base and time and relationships that I had. But a significant part of my life, and I truly believe, as a young Maori woman, DPB, and I had my son when I was very young. So I had my eldest son, who was now 26 at the age of 18. And I still recall having to go through the system and budgeting the week as everybody else does, and living paycheck to paycheck sort of thing, or benefit to benefit. And I think some of those lessons learnt then, I still carry those as my value set, which I think was is something to take from a bad situation that, all these years later, I can still remember and recall what it was like. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that learning, and I'm definitely grateful to be able to share and help other people. And that's why I think I just loved that work. Loved it. Yeah.
Growing up in Southland as a Maori woman, did you at any point find yourself marginalised or limited in your opportunities? And were you surprised at this? And do you think that? I hope it's got a lot better for different marginalised groups and genders in this country. Have you seen change in this, and have you had any sort of personal experiences in that?
Yeah, a real interesting question, and one I've really thought about, Sam. I've never had any issues at all throughout my career, probably up until the time I become an elected councillor.
Right.
And I think that was it's something that I didn't actually expect to happen.
Right.
I was the first Maori woman elected onto our council. So there had
Congratulations.
been no, thank you, there'd been no Māori woman elected into the role of a councillor within Invercargill, but it's not something that I realised until after the fact. And once I grasped the fact or the importance of being the first wahine Māori to sit at the table, there was almost a sense of responsibility, oh gosh, I better not let everybody down. So it was quite an interesting dynamic. And my own personal journey, I grew up, in a great family environment. Mum and dad were very, they really put us into a place where we could excel. So I was a swimmer since a very young age, and swam competitively for most of my childhood. And if I wasn't swimming, I was singing. So I was musically driven and sport, driven. So I was a competitor my entire life. And I think that really gauged who I am now, or contributed to the kind of skills and that competitive nature that I have now. But coming in as an elected member and not understanding the significance of being the first Māori woman was quite daunting, to be fair. And I was never treated any differently. If anything, I think I was able to encourage those around the table that may not have had a te ao Māori view on, maybe thinking differently. That in itself was also a challenge, because sometimes I used to think, why do I see things so differently? I don't understand why I feel this way, yet everybody else feels another way. And I think that had a lot to do with te ao Māori kaupapa and how, we see things differently. So that was an interesting time. And when I embraced that, from that point on, I really excelled. So I seen it as my responsibility and my right to be a wahine Māori and at the table. And I really embraced that and took that. And now, in our council, they've just adopted mana whenua representation on our council. So we've come a long way.
What does that representation mean and entail into the future?
Yeah, so most councils have an opportunity to have a Māori ward. Our council decided that wasn't the way that they wanted to go. So the Māori wards were voted down. And as a result of that, mana whenua had a conversation with council, and I believe, and I wasn't around at that time, it's after I left, they came to an agreement to have two Māori mana whenua representatives that sit on both of their committees to be able to, and have voting rights, to be able to bring that, the mana whenua and Māori view, I suppose, and represent their people. I think one of the things that I'm most concerned about is we have mana whenua, who are Ngāi Tahu for us here in Invercargill, and then we also have Mātāwaka, so all the other, iwi tribes that live here and have been here for years and years. And I guess it's really important that we don't disconnect other Māori from being heard within our council elected table. So that's still a work in progress, and something that I would like to see them strengthen there, is to ensure that all Māori are able to come through mana whenua representation and have their say at the table. Yeah,
I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, as imperfect as it may start out. Why do you think or do you think that there is traditionally more men on the council tables and in publicly elected roles in general? And is it like an old boys club scenario, do you think?
I think once upon a time it would be, but if you look at history is the reason why it is the way it is now, and it's changing that to enable women and other other diverse cultures come into elected membership. I think there's a huge piece of work that needs to be done around empowering other ethnicities and cultures to stand.
Yeah.
And that's probably more of the piece of the puzzle that I think needs a lot more work. Because a lot of people say, I would love to do that, but they don't know how to go about it. They don't feel that they're maybe have the skill set to stand as an elected member. And look, I tell you, it's an interesting game when you're in a council or any board that really signifies the need for diversity in the discussion and decision makings. So yeah, I think I would love to see more work done on really embracing those other cultural cultures to grow the people capability amongst themselves so that they are in a better position to be able to stand. Yeah.
Does that start at the society level? Do you think it's like an education thing that should be pushed in schools, or?
Yeah, I think even, schools, I think, need to know and understand what elected bodies do. We tend to talk about government, but we never tend to talk about local government. They're very different, things. And what local government is responsible for doing and delivering within the community is actually more significant than what a government is responsible for doing for an entire country at times. This is the place that we live, and it's where we want to bring our children up. And I believe it should be taught, that local politics or local government is just as important as national. There's a real place for local government. And to have a good community means that you need to have community participate and engage with local government. And there's always been that segregation for me. What's local government? I think as long as the toilet flushes and the rubbish is taken away, most people are like, yep, that's okay. They're doing their job. Great. But when you are an elected member, you see a huge side of the community saying, oh yeah, you're a councillor, you're on council and you should be doing this. And it's almost a mandate to criticise. So I think there needs to be a bit more education in that piece. Yeah.
Just got one more question on sort of women in leadership roles.
Yep.
Do you believe like the way forward in publicly elected councils or government would be to implement legislation around like a 50-50 quota, or do you believe that these roles should be like purely based on merit, whether that's 100% women end up getting elected or 100% men, or does it even have to be that black and white?
Yeah, I think the way it is now is perfectly fine. I think what I've learnt is the absolute importance of understanding governance, really knowing the difference between the governance versus operations. And I think that would lead me then to say that it is absolutely critical to know, what you're doing in these roles. So whether you're a male or a female, it really makes no difference to me as long as you understand the role and what you need to do in the role and what you don't need to worry about in the role. It's always been the hardest for governors to understand the governance versus operations. And many get mixed up and confused by the two. And it's completely normal and it's completely, not necessarily acceptable, but you understand why. I had very little governance experience when I went into council. And I would say, in all fairness, that elections are almost a popularity vote. You have a good name in the community, a publicly recognised name. You've been out in community sector for a long time. They tend to be the people that poll the highest because there's that recognition of name. So in saying that, it's great. But if you don't have the experience and understand the role as a governor, then things can be very frustrating and complicated. And I think that was the biggest learning for me going in, is you ultimately need a good year to two to understand what your role is as a council, what your role is as an elected member, and then work towards sort of determining how you navigate the beast of local government that it is. So you definitely on merit and skill set. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I grew up in Southland, went to Southland Boys, and I've got a big passion for that area and that city, and I believe that it's a great place for growing up, for raising a family. I do believe that, like, for aspirational individuals such as myself in their early to mid 20s, it's sort of lacks the sort of professional opportunities and pathways reflective of a small town. I mean, right around the country, I guess. It's probably a town where a lot of younger people grow up, head away for the majority of their 20s and 30s, and then come back and find themselves starting a family or, owning a home later on once they're actually established in a career. Uh, I look at Invercargill and I see quite a bright future, one that's attracted both private and ratepayer funding into the like of the Invercargill City rebuild. There's quite considerable development and change happening right now in Invercargill, and what that needs is to complement it as a future driven and an effective council that is running the ship. One that's cohesive and efficient with their decision making. I just got some questions about the Invercargill City Council and your time on that. What originally inspired you to run back in 2016?
Oh, wow. Well, this is interesting. I'd been incredibly interested in local government and politics in general, but definitely have always been someone that probably advocates for the underdog. And I too agree with you that then, I had grown up, loved my community, loved living in Invercargill, but always wanted something different, something better, and had those opportunities to go out and come back to an environment where it's safe to bring up children, it's affordable to own a home, you're accessible to the likes of Queenstown, Milford Sound. Like, the landscape down here is incredible and it's so beautiful. I went to one meeting and sadly it wasn't sadly, but the meeting that I was at was submissions for the long-term plan. So during that time, councillors will hear from community members who are brave enough to come in and prepare their speeches, and they stand up and they present to the council about what their thoughts are on the long-term plan. In this one occasion, there was a young lady who was partially blind giving her presentation, and I witnessed a couple of elected members asleep. So it was fair to say that I was incredibly angry with what I seen and witnessed, and I was supported by ensuring that what I was seeing was in fact real and happening. So had another couple of people that were elected members, and they said, yep, that's what was happening. So I took to Facebook without even thinking and basically said, I'm coming for your seat. It is not acceptable that anyone should be half asleep in a meeting, especially when communities are giving submissions to your long-term plan, to our long-term plan, our city's long-term plan. And with that, as you can imagine, it went viral. I got a huge amount of support, and then quickly stepped back and went, uh-oh, what have you done? And from then on, I was focused on becoming an elected member at that council, and that's all I seen during my campaign was ensuring that people that were in those seats were actually there for the right reasons. And that's what I took. That's what made my decision to stand.
It's pretty funny because I remember in 2016 I was second year uni, and I voted from Dunedin, or I got someone. I was in Invercargill. I remember voting, and I saw your little blurb on the back, and made sure I voted. Was there any surprises or challenges during a election campaign, and how did a campaign look for a seat at the Invercargill Council table? Did you gauge levels of support before you decided to put your hat in the ring?
No, because it was a reaction to what I seen. And then once I had said publicly, I'm coming for a seat, it was too late. So I really had to put my money where my mouth was and get in there and deliver the best campaign that I could. And I think it's interesting because in hindsight, I don't believe that the way that I run my first campaign would ever be something that I would advise anyone to do. And I think what happens is people who stand for council do so by saying that the council that's currently sitting in the chairs are no good. Everything they're doing is wrong. I can do better. But in actual fact, one person doesn't make a difference. It's very much a numbers game. So I think the second time I run my campaign for re-election was very much a positive campaign. It was more about what I could offer as an individual. It was more about what I felt needed to be done in collaboration with other elected members, instead of a targeted, you were asleep, you've got to go. So I learned that if you want to run a campaign for election, you need to do so in a positive way. Yeah. And I think that's the first mistake people make, is they think they can come in and change the world. And if you do that, you realize very quickly that's not how it works. You spend your first year learning that there's a system and a process that you are part of. You learn that you are only one person and you need to get the support of other elected members around the table to get things across the line. You also spend the second year feeling quite depressed that that's the case and you thought you could go in and change the world. And then in the third year of your first term, you start to click around being able to, bring notices of motion to the table, understand standing orders and how you can operate within those to get things accomplished, the importance of influencing your colleagues and other elected members. And once you get there, you then understand the way to navigate local government, and it becomes a whole different ballgame. Yeah. And I love it. I loved it. Yeah, absolutely loved it.
It sounds fascinating. Like as someone who's studied, I did a year of law, and I've got a politics degree from sort of Otago University, but I mainly focused on foreign affairs and how countries have relationships with each other.
Cool, yeah.
And
that's awesome.
More so central government in New Zealand. We weren't taught like what some of the fundamental levers are of a city council table, and even hearing your thoughts around, your campaign on, you advocate for a lot of change, and you can think you can come in and sort of tip the table up, and but then you realise that you're one of like 11 or 12,
13,
13 votes on the table. Yeah. And what are like some of these levers, and how does this look in terms of legislations and votes and committees and things? How does the basics of a council table work?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So in our council originally, when I was elected, we had 4 committees. They were made up of Audit and Risk, Community Committee, I think it was back then, Regulatory Committee, and Finance Committee. So there was 4 separate committees, and each elected member was on 2 of the 4. So most of the decisions were brought to the elected members in a committee meeting. And then those committees would ratify or pass recommendations that would go up to the full council. So you kind of had 2 bites at the cherry. If you wanted to try and push something through, you would push it at committee level. Then you had to ensure that you had the support to get it across the line, or get the recommendation passed by gathering momentum and support from your full council. We changed that for a number of reasons. We felt that 2 committees, which were a committee of all councillors, were a better way to run our council at that time. And that was because we had Sir Tim Chapbolt, who was our mayor and is still our mayor. He was chairing the full council, and to alleviate some of the pressure of that, we brought together the 2 committees, 2 standing committees. So there we have a different way of working in Southland in comparison to what I would think other councils throughout the country have. So most of the recommendations come to committee. They are decided at committee whether or not the resolution will go forward, and then we don't necessarily have to take all of those recommendations to council. So what it actually does is speeds up the process for the community as well. normally if you have a cycle of 6 weeks, you would be making a decision in week 1. You then wouldn't have it ratified until week 5. And then, a council elected member might ask for more reports. So you'd go back through that cycle again. And this way, in Murihiku and in Southland and Invercargill, just Invercargill Council, I believe it's great because it's one meeting, decision made, and then we're into implementation phase. Yeah, so it works really well for us. Yeah, I think it does.
Prior to coming onto the table or coming onto the council in 2016, what surprised you the most from your outside perception of council at the time to actually being on council?
Yeah, it's funny because you go through a campaign telling council that they're no good, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a room with those elected members, and you need to build relationship with those elected members to make sure that you get your
ideas across.
So huge learning curve for me when I went in. I think I had a lot of, and this is something that I probably haven't shared as much, but I felt that I didn't quite belong when I first went in. Am I wealthy enough? Am I educated enough to be an elected member? And there is a word for that, and I know that it's slipped from my mind, but it will come to me.
It's sort of like being intimidated, or no?
I wasn't. It was almost like I'm not good enough to be here.
Right.
And I questioned that prior to actual going into the chamber. And as you can imagine, the chamber, as it was when I started, was almost like a court environment where you've got the top tier up the table and you've got all this mayor wears this chains, and then you've got these big gigantic seats and a big round table, and you're like, oh shoot, I've got to make some pretty big decisions for a city now. I'm responsible. All that talk of my campaign, I'm now here, and we're going to vote, and it's happening very fast, and all of a sudden all those in favor, and you're like, oh, I really didn't know what I got myself into, to be fair. And then once I started listening to others around the table, very quickly I realized that we're all just human, and we're all here trying to make a difference. We definitely did have our differences within our council, and of course we're not there to make friends, but we are there to work together. And I think that's the hardest thing being in local government, is that you have 13 people with their own agenda, and anyone who says they don't have agendas going into local politics is a liar, because you all do bring things that you want to see achieved for your community. So we all have different agendas, we all want different things and different outcomes, and we all see success differently. And that's why that leadership is so important, is to create a team of individuals that are going to come together on some common themes and understandings across the board to make progress. And that's why it's important to have that strong leadership at the top to be able to navigate that and do that. And I think that's probably what we're missing right now. Yeah.
So, you have to deal with people from all walks of life and all political viewpoints as well on that table, which then I guess determines their definition of success. In terms of like the budgets that you've got to play with, and the council's got to play with to make decisions, how much is it, and like what is the pool of funding from the ratepayer? How did the council go about allocating these ratepayer funds? Like, as someone who's looking from the outside in, is there like an annual budget? Is there certain
what goes on in there?
Yeah, like are there certain areas that you just can't budge in terms of expenditure, and how's that balance struck between like the priorities and then looking 10, 20 years down the line, the future vision?
Yeah. It's a pretty tough gig. I think, to be fair, our rate funding pool was around about 60 odd million. And, we have when we create what we call a long-term plan that sets out the next 10-year plan for a council. And within that plan, you have your asset renewal, your infrastructure, you've got your water, you've got roading, you've got all the things that are boring, sewage, but they take up a huge chunk of that money. And more than what I ever realized in a million years, there is a huge portion of money that needs to be considered in all the stuff that's not sexy. It's not really cool. Who wants to talk about pipes and drainage and underwater ground facilities and all those sorts of things?
Things that the public would not recognise.
Correct.
If they're all going well, but if they're going wrong, they'll recognise.
That's right. Yep, you don't hear from council unless you've got a complaint. So, those things are critical for a city to function. I mean, infrastructure is one of the most important things that the city has. So when you go into council and you realise, oh, okay, we're talking about roading and pipes and poos and, all of those different things, it's kind of like boring. And it's you have to shift your mindset, because I think people coming onto a council thinks, great, we can build new buildings and we can build all these awesome skate parks and all these awesome things for the people. And when you get in there, the reality is very different. It's basic needs for a community is that infrastructure under, and above the ground. So water and things like that I'd never really had an interest in until I started as a councillor. And then the budget obviously consumes a lot of that, because infrastructure is not cheap, and then it's making sure that you forecast money for when your assets and infrastructure needs to be renewed in 50 years, and you look out like a helicopter, you look out so far that before you know it, once you get to the cool stuff like new buildings and new assets and I think hydrosides and swimming pools and cool stuff, there's not really a lot left. So it's an interesting lens to look through externally and say, oh, why aren't council doing this, that, and the next thing? But when you're in there, you do realize very quickly that the boring stuff consumes a lot of our, our financial portfolio, because that's what makes our city run. Yeah.
How did you find the relationship between central government and the ICC during your time on the council? What sort of things did it cover and relate to, and who did you deal with anyone from central government?
Yeah, I don't think we had a good relationship with central government. I think that's normally your leadership role, the mayoralty and having those connections, the CEOs connecting with local government, central government. And I think that's another area in which I believe that we could do a lot better in. We're very self-sufficient down here in Southland, and we're not really good at asking for help. Buggy, we'll do it ourselves. That's the kind of attitude we have. That's what makes us who we are, right? But those relationships are critical, because there are a huge amount of funding pool and mechanism within central government for many communities. And as a result of COVID, we see that now. We see that because it has to be done. But those relationships and building those networks and making sure that we understand the government priorities and how we can take advantage of those priorities to ensure that our community gets the best and leverages those opportunities is something that I believe our council should work on. And that comes across the board, all roles within council, having those government officials that, those connections. And even so, now that I work within government, I notice, I understand the importance of being able to have a community council that's very well connected with central. And so that would be, if I ever went back in many years to come, that would be one thing I would push, is those relationships to be, really nurtured and understanding the government priorities moving forward in your tenure.
It must be challenging, because can the council do anything for when, you get different cabinets come into power in central government, and they've got their own philosophies and sort of agendas. I wouldn't say whether I'm for or against it, but with Chris Hipkins coming in, and he's wanting to centralise these tertiary institutions such as SIT and around the whole country. You've got, different education ministers and other ministers coming in and just sort of sticking their own finger into the regions and trying to get back that power that was once in the regions. It must be, just a really tough balance to get. But then you've got to manage like relationships where, you're pitching for funding for the Invercargill City rebuild, and you're dealing with central government right across the board in that way. How do you think the rebuild's going, and what was your experience in the planning of this?
Well, I'm so excited for the rebuild. It wasn't an easy feat at all. We had two incredible local businessmen who fronted up with an incredible opportunity. You would just never get that opportunity anywhere else. Someone from an individual coming to you saying, I've got 20 million of my own dollars that I want to invest in our city. How do we make this work?
Wow.
And not only having one, but having two. Two people with $20 million of their own money saying, this is what we want to achieve. This is the ultimate outcome. Here's some contribution. We want to get this done. We want to see Invercargill change and transform. I mean, this is the biggest transformation that we've ever seen within Southland, I believe, in my 45 years. There's just been nothing like it. And what it started to do is there's hope. People are getting excited and starting to get proud of being in Southland and Invercargill. It's so interesting. And I revert back to your comments earlier about people wanting to leave and then come back. But if you look at how the world's changing, we're very fortunate here. The world is moving where you can potentially work from anywhere you want. I think recently Xero announced that, you can work any hours you want and from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
That is just incredible. It's never seen anything like it. It's transformational.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want to come to a place that's affordable to own a home? We have beautiful, there's just a beauty about Southland that's safe, and some would say conservative. And I guess that they're probably right. I would say that. But there's still this magnificent beauty that we're still very much a community here in Southland. So, I think that we're on the verge of becoming probably one of the best places to live. But we have to make that adaptable for people. We've got weather that's not such an attraction, but we can do more now than what we ever have before to mitigate that. If we think big and think strategic and think about the offer. And, my goal was always to have a youth say, I'm from Invercargill and I'm so bloody proud of that. It's not something that I said. I think I might have said I'm from Southland, so I could have been from anywhere. But yeah, it would be nice to see our youth and our rangatahi grow up and say, hey, I'm from Invercargill. It's such a cool place to be. And yeah, the weather's not very good, but this is what else we have to offer, I'm not even sure if I've answered your original question, Sam.
It was amazing.
I just got off on a wee tangent there.
It was great. Let's sort of dig into the planning of it. Did you find any backlash from, or did the council during your tenure find any backlash from people or the public who just said, right, let's keep things the way they are, there's nothing wrong with it? Or do you think?
You always have that, absolutely. But I guess they were the minority, to be fair. I think it was fear. There was a sense of fear for a lot of ratepayers that they didn't, understand. And I get that, like my nan's 80. She's a ratepayer. She's at a different phase of her life. So why on earth should we be spending $26 million or whatever it was in the end to fund a project that she may never get to enjoy? Like, I get that. Completely understand that. And then you've got young people who are like, just get it done already. We've been waiting on something, we've got the rest of our life to enjoy it. Hurry up and get on with it. So there's a real, not a divide, but there are different reasons why people reacted differently to that. But overall, when we went out for consultation, there was a huge amount of people in favour for this project.
The majority, yeah.
The majority. Yeah, and when you see it coming to fruition now, although it presents new challenges for us, like we've got businesses in the city centre at the moment that don't have access, and so are struggling,
Mm.
to keep going. And we know that will change once the redevelopment is opened. But what are we sacrificing at the moment to achieve that outcome is what we need to be working on in the interim. But no, I think overall, when you see people promoting the city centre redevelopment and proud of what's happening, and you see all the plans and then you see it coming to fruition, that's a huge block. But what it has done is it sparked interest for investor in Murihiku. People are, oh, I might actually come home. Wouldn't that be cool? I could actually do my job via internet or Zoom, and I can bring my family home to where we can buy a beautiful house for half the price. Why wouldn't we just, change our lifestyle? I think lifestyle is going to be something that people seek, especially as a result of COVID. Lifestyle will be something that they seek, and that's something that we can absolutely offer. My husband and I are away to Queenstown tomorrow to spend time with our kids, doing a bit of tramping and biking and enjoying it. It's 2.5 hours up the road. Perfect, So
Yeah, I definitely see my future as being down south and back in Invercargill, and the company I'm involved with, animation research out of Dunedin, Surrey and Taylor's technology company. They had some pretty big developments last year in R&D, and from a time where they had to send up to a dozen people over to America and Europe and things. Now they only need to send one or two, and the rest of them are working from the central office in Dunedin. So lifestyles are changing, technology is
very
developing,
much.
and looking ahead from like a council standpoint, what do you believe that they need in order to become more efficient and successful? More broadly than that rebuild, just in general.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you asked that question, because we have climate change. If you look where Invercargill was located, do we need to be thinking bigger where we want to be in the future? And I'm talking about a whole landscape and city shift. We need to take advantage of our water that is ultimately, it's so much part of our community, and how we can really build from or build on that. So when I think about council, I think so broad and so long term, rather than diving down into the detail. It's definitely not something that I think about, but the world is changing and we need to actually change with it.
Yeah.
And if you think about us here in 2021 who are living through a pandemic, and our children that are growing up in a pandemic, things will be very different for them in 50 years, I would imagine. So different. And we're only just sort of starting to see how different that potential looks like.
Yeah.
What does that look like? It's a really exciting. And I think what we haven't done here in Southland for the last 20 years is prepared for our future now. So we're kind of on the back foot. Malls have been done. They've been done all around the world. Ours isn't a mall. I don't want to call it a mall because it's not, but it's almost the heart of our city, and we need to start building on that now. What does that look like long term? But from an operational perspective, I think our council, needs to start attracting more people to local government, promoting the good that they do. And councils do a huge amount of work that is really good. I've sat with those elected members, and every one of them, I believe, come on to council to make a difference. And working cohesively together, getting good leadership qualities in there, making sure that we are future thinking and future proofing, rather than sort of thinking about the next 3 to 5 years. I think that's what our elected members need to start thinking about, because it's all different. It's all changing so quickly, really rapidly.
Absolutely. Last question. So I'd like to get your thoughts on Mayor Tim Shadbolt. In my experience,
Oh,
he's
fancy
always
asking me that question.
yeah. He's always been a supportive influence for me. I remember back in high school when I went in and interviewed him on his stance on nuclear-free movement back in the day and his involvement in protests and things.
Cool.
And in 2017, he was a guest at my or at the opening night of a photography exhibition I was in charge of over on Don Street there. So more recently, there's been quite a lot of comments in the media about his performance. What are your general thoughts on this, and what was your experience like working with the mayor?
Yeah, I did a recent interview for Sunday not long ago, and I think for me, it gave me a bit of closure on the topic. Um, I love Sir Tim. I have the utmost respect for him. He's got incredible qualities, and he's honest and open and upfront, and um, he's actually quite a character. I could sit there and listen to his stories for hours and hours and never get bored. I've never really heard his worship speak badly or illy of anyone. I remember having a meal after council one night, and there was quite a bit of food, not too much, but I remember him saying to me, we're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be having this food, this kai. Others are out in the community, you're wondering when the next meal's coming from. Like he's got a real sense of people at heart, and I think that's why he's been in all the things that he's done were always about improving things for the better of people. So I love him. And I've enjoyed my time working with him. I learnt an incredible amount from his worship around politics, to always be considerate of what others think and to always listen before telling people, and getting permission from people to answer questions. So I used to watch him write his columns, and he still writes old school script. I thought he might have typed, or the secretary might have typed it up for him, but he writes everyone, and he writes down these bullet points of the topics that he wants to cover. And then you see him articulate in his writing, and he's just incredible. And then when you read the piece, you think, wow, that is outstanding. There's always a real depth to his writing, and he's an orator. So I have the utmost respect for him. In regards to his performance, when those cameras go, oh man, he's a performer, he's an entertainer, and I know what that's like. He's an entertainer at heart, and that's what you do. You just switch on and you do what you got to do. But I think that he's in a really tough position. He's got his partner supporting him with what she thinks is, the best, and that's what partners do, and that's definitely what's happening there. And then you've got council on this side, and I just think he's a bit of the meat in the middle at the moment. What I would love to see is the community decide and take some time to really determine the future for Invercargill, really determine what it is that they want to achieve, really determine what it is that they want their city to represent in the future, and then make their decision around who would be the best person to lead that. Whether it is Sir Tim or whether it is someone else will always be the decision of the voter, but I think this time I would love the community to take a step back and really think about the future of Invercargill, and not necessarily make it a popularity vote, because it's a popularity vote. I would love to see our community really take time to think about their next mayor, the qualities of the mayor, how they are going to, promote and take our city forward for the next 3 to 6 years. What qualities they have and attributions they have to ensure that those relationships with central government are strong, to ensure they've got the leadership style to bring the elected members together, to make sure that they deliver a long-term plan and do it in a way where the community, they get some community trust back. Like our community doesn't care what we fight and squabble about. They just want to see progress. They want to be able to know that their city is progressing forward, so that they aren't in a position where they may have to leave. It's pretty simple.
Exactly. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
really, really interesting insights there, and I really thank you for your time talking about your work in social development, your current role, women in leadership, and the future of Invercargill as well. It's been
Thanks, Sam.
it's been really enjoyable to chat, and yeah.
I love a good yarn, mate, and I'm very passionate about it, but I tend to get quite excited and emotive. But thank you for your time. Congratulations on the mahi that you're doing. You're doing some really cool stuff. You should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.